Hello everybody, this is Graeme Anderson, and today I'm going to be looking at Alhambra Roll and Write. Now, one of my go-to games for a nice, good weight family game has always been Alhambra. It's an excellent and solid game. So when I saw that the same designer here also did the roll and write version, I figured I had to try it. Now this is a roll and write game, where you're going to roll some dice and mark something off on your player board. Now there have been many of these games that have come out in the market the last several years. Some of them are truly excellent and enjoyable. Some of them, not so much. But with this one, with its pedigree, it has to be good, right? Well, let's get it to the table, see if it's solid enough for a building foundation, or if it'll just crumble back into dust. And we'll come back to my final thoughts on Alhambra Roll and Write.
Here's Alhambra Roll and Write set up for 3 players. Each player has a player sheet in front of them along with a blue and yellow die. The score pad is given to the first player with all the players' names entered on each line. Starting with the first player, each player will roll both of their dice and place them on the matching rows and columns. Cross off the building where these 2 dice intersect as you have now constructed that building. As each player does so, the first player will mark it off on the main scoring sheet showing who has constructed what buildings. This will continue until all players have constructed 3 buildings. If you have to construct a building that has already been constructed, just roll again. Once each player has 3 buildings crossed off, all players roll their dice one last time and place them on their player board on the appropriate row and column. The first player then takes an additional set of dice and rolls them and adds them to their player board. Each player also starts with 3 coins, which are already marked on their player board. Alhambra Roll and Write is played over a fixed set of rounds. For our 3-player game, it will last 18 rounds. A round consists of each player taking a dice action, and when it gets around to the first player again, they will mark off 1 round on the score pad. During a player's turn, they must either construct a building or gain coins. You can perform extra actions by spending coins, which I'll talk about in a bit. To construct a building, the active player will select 1 yellow and 1 blue die from their 4 available to them. You can only construct a building that has not been previously constructed or crossed out. The first player will then mark off on the score pad the building that the active player built. If the player has built the final building of a type, they will score the highest possible points left at the end of the round. If multiple players finish off that building type in the current round, then add all the tied places and divide by the number of players. The first player will then circle the score on the main score pad, as these points will not be given out at the end of the game. Any player who completes their building set in the following rounds will be awarded the next highest available points. Once the active player has finished constructing a building, they'll pass the unused pair of dice, without changing their face, to the next player who places them on their board. The active player will then re-roll their dice that they use for building, and place it on their player board, and their turn is over. Now, instead of constructing a building, the active player could also have gained coins. Find the intersection of all 4 dice and gain, that is circle, 1 coin on your board for each constructed building at the 4 intersections. Once you've gained your coins, roll all 4 dice, decide the blue and yellow dice you wish to keep, and place them on your board. The other 2 dice are passed unchanged to the next player who places them on their board, and your turn is over. Anytime you receive dice that are identical to ones you already have, just place them on top. As an additional free action, you can spend coins to perform special actions. Spend coins by crossing them off your board, and of course you can only spend coins you have previously gained and you have not previously spent. If you spend 1 coin, you can add or subtract 1 from an available die. You can spend multiple coins to change the die more than once, and you can change more than 1 die by spending these coins. But you can never change a 6 to a 1 and vice versa. After you change your dice, you must either do the construct a building action or the gain coins action. For 3 coins, after you constructed a building this turn, you can construct a second building using the other 2 dice that were not used for the first building. As usual, mark off both buildings on the score pad. Then roll all 4 dice and select 1 blue and 1 yellow, and pass the other 2 unchanged to the next player. The game ends after a set number of rounds. We then move into final scoring. For each building type, the points are awarded to the players who built the most of that type, but you'll only be scoring the points for places that were not claimed during the game. So, if someone had built all their blue buildings during the game, they would have already gained their 16 points. They would not receive any additional points during final scoring for the blue buildings. The remaining points, 8 and 1, are awarded to the other players based on who built the most. Now you must have built at least one of a type of building to score any points for that building set. You're going to score points based on the number of buildings in a row or column you have built. If you build all 6 in a row or column, that's 10 points. 5 buildings is 5 points, and 4 buildings is 2 points. And finally, for every 2 coins you have left over that have not been spent, score a point. Then add up all the points, and the player with the most points is the winner. Let's get back to see what I thought about Alhambra Roll and Write.
I'm going to skip the theme of the game and just talk about the components. The pads are nice and large and very colorful. I really like the look of this game. It definitely gives me vibes of the original. Now the different types of buildings are easily discernible, and all the sheets are double-sided, so you have a fair number of plays in the box. So the components are pretty good. So let's go on to the gameplay. Now this game is definitely on the lighter side, even for a roll and write game. On your turn, you basically have one main decision: get coins or mark off a house. Usually it's a fairly easy decision to be made, and that's definitely not a bad thing. So the core gameplay on your turn is enjoyable, but I do have a few problems with the game. The first is the player count. The box says 1 to 5. It really shouldn't. This is a 3 to 5 player game. The solo and 2-player game modes are pretty basic. In a 2-player game, after players have taken their turn, a set of dice are rolled for the extra player, and that's marked off on the main score pad. It really doesn't feel that enjoyable at 2 players. For the other end of the scale, you hit another problem. I'm used to, in a roll and write games, to be involved in other players' turns. Either using some of their dice or all players using the same roll dice to keep the game moving. Not here. You have to wait for your turn. What other players are doing really doesn't matter, and each player has to roll their dice and then decide what they want to do. There's very little pre-planning you can do for your turn. You roll your dice and then stare at them to see what better moves there are, all the while the other players are just kind of waiting. Yes, you probably want to be looking at what dice you're giving to the next player to make sure that you're not, giving them to something to finish off a set of buildings, but often you're just kind of looking at what makes the best sense for yourself. The coins do add a bit more choice, but getting buildings always seems a better choice than getting coins, as it's more of a race to see who can get the most buildings. That's the other thing that kind of puzzled me. There seems to be no advantage to finishing off a set during the game, or just having the most at the end. If you do it during the game, you're guaranteed to get those points, yes. But you don't score a bonus, you don't score them again at the end of the game, so as long as I have the most at the end of the game, I'm going to get all those points anyway. The game design to me just feels old, and not in a good way. It feels like this game should have come out several years ago when roll and writes were first becoming popular. It almost feels like the designer has ignored the emerging trends in roll and write and decided to make it feel like a classic roll and write. But that, for me, wasn't a good choice. So would I recommend this game? No, I don't think I would. The core gameplay is fine. But with the lighter roll and writes, I want them to be fast and engaging to all players all the time. This one just doesn't do that. Now, I did like the components. They are bright and colorful and nicely done. I also thought the game was simple, but it still gave you some decisions to be made. I like the idea of the coins. Being able to manipulate your dice or double build can definitely be fun. But for me, the biggest detractors of the game are that the players are not involved when it's not their turn, which wouldn't be a bad thing if the turns were super fast, and they're not. Players cannot really plan their turns, as when they get their second set of dice and roll them, they get more options to choose from. Plus, the spending of the coins can further increase their choices, means that players' turns tend to drag. I'm also not a big fan of the 2-player variant, but I haven't tried the solo variant, which is, according to the rules, exactly like the 2-player variant, but you're going to be rolling dice for 2 virtual players instead of just 1. So overall, I'm going to give this game a 6 out of 10. It's not a bad game, and I think at 3 players it's probably the best because you get the full game with as little downtime as possible. Unfortunately, this game has come out in a very popular genre with many, many better roll and writes. I can't see this one being remembered in even a few months' time, as it seems to be missing some of the things I look for in a lighter roll and write: speed and engagement of all the players on everybody's turn. But that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.